DDoS from an organization called as Sourcefire. Now, this product, or these two products, they tried to sell them together, okay, on a single device through a module, whatever, okay? And since Cisco has been popular all these years, everyone, wanted to have a go at it, right? That it's Cisco, they would be doing the things correctly, et cetera, et cetera. But this integration that Cisco tried to do with ASA and the newly acquired product, it did not go really well at that point in time. Okay, because think of this. You take two different softwares and you try to merge them together. Okay, so obviously it takes time to really get that integration working properly. At that time, Palo was coming out, okay, and all Palo did at that time was only firewalls, nothing else. Okay, now you see Palo doing a lot of things, right? They are doing AI, they are doing Cortex, they're doing a lot of cloud-based thing, they are doing SD-WAN as well. But they started with just a firewall product, okay? And their software, their hardware, most importantly, the software, right, used to be very stable, okay? And I'm saying used to be because they have had their own share of not so good software upgrades in the recent years. Okay, for the past couple of years, if you're going to go out on the internet and read some reviews and everything from people, from deployments, from actual people who are managing firewalls in production, nowadays they're not really happy with Palo's stance on how they're doing things. Okay, but that is a discussion for some other day. Okay, but that's what happened at that point in time. Okay, so Cisco kind of lost the market, lost a lot of customers at that point in time because the product was not stable. Okay, the product was not good. And Palo was really offering everything for, at that point in time, maybe at the same price or even lower than that. Okay, plus the software was good, the performance was good, stability was good. They had a very unique architecture, software architecture, which they call it the SP3 or single pass parallel processing. Okay, so it has got those three Ps. Okay, so it was very, very relevant. So Palo really gained market at that time. Okay, and it became one of the most popularly adopted security product, and it still is. Okay, but again, like I said, there has been lots of ups and downs with respect to Palo as well, especially in the last couple of years. Okay, doing lots of different new softwares, software stability has been affected. Their support has not been good. Okay, so people have been paying from premium support, but they have not been getting the support which they are paying for, obviously, and they're not really too happy about it. New software versions that Palo has been releasing, it is breaking previous deployments. Their renewal costs are high now. Okay, they expect customers to kind of change the hardware rather than retain the hardware. So when you kind of renew those costs, the costing is high nowadays. Okay, so people are not too happy. Okay, and a lot of people who adopted or who moved from Cisco to Palo are now moving back from Palo to Cisco because Cisco's firewall is now very, very stable. It's very, very good now. Okay, all of those years of doing that research and development and fixing the problems, etc., they have now gained the market a lot. So if you people, like I said, you guys should follow a lot of reports and everything that happen. So if you might know, a lot of products, they go through testing, right? So Gartner does testing, right? Forrester does testing, right? NS3 Labs does testing. So they're kind of independent organizations who take products from different vendors and they run these products through, let's just say, tests. Okay? And then they kind of give their ratings on what best they feel out of, let's say, 10 different products that they tested. Okay, and Cisco So for 2025, Cisco has won the best next generation firewall kind of designation or certificate from such vendors. So they have been doing a lot of good nowadays as well. Okay, so that's where the Palo popularity came into picture. Okay, plus in my experience, Palo is a little easier to use as well. Okay, so it's web interface, which we will be going through when we will be walking through the labs and everything. The user interface is very intuitive. Okay, a lot of things, a lot of tabs, menus, and everything, they make a lot of sense, to be honest. Okay, so if you play around with Palo Firewall for some time, okay, um, it'll be very, very easy for you to kind of navigate and understand how things really are. Okay, another vendor that is fairly popular nowadays is Fortinet as well. Okay, and one thing that Fortinet is really good at is the price. It's the cheapest among the major players. Cisco, Palo, okay, and Fortinet. So Fortinet is the cheapest, okay? Their software is still not that good, not on par with, let's say, Palo or Cisco, okay? But they kind of compensate that with cost, okay? And they have their own concept of doing the fabric. They give you the SD-WAN functionality that you can run through their firewalls without any additional costs, etc., etc. Okay, so they're very popular in the market as well. All right, but that was just a very very brief overview of the different vendors and why Palo is kind of out there still. All right, hope that answered the question. Some
I have a question.
Yes, yes, please.
Yes. Okay. So, would in this course would we be going through like automation that has integration with like Palo Alto, using their API at any point?
I will cover the automation, how you can do the API. I'll talk about the different API methods, how you can access things, how you can automate things. But obviously, we won't go into a lot of details. I mean, we're not going to go into at length of how to do scripts and everything, those sort of things.
Right, but like a higher level overview would
I'll do
be
that.
okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, this is Lakshmi Priya. Actually, I
Yes.
also have a question regarding SD-WAN part. So, are we covering the SD-WAN also in this
No, we are
course?
not covering SD-WAN. So this is not going to cover SD-WAN.
Okay, not even the basics or overview sort of thing.
If you want to, I can cover basics of SD-WAN in general, because kind of SD-WAN works the same across vendors. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's purely just IPsec tunnels being built between locations. So if you want, I can at a later point towards the end, I can cover a very high level overview of couple of topics with respect to SD-WAN. But we won't look at SD-WAN at stretch, because I mean when we look at the what we are trying to cover, the next generation firewall engineer piece, and the previous PCNSE or the PCNSA, SD-WAN is not part of that. So SD-WAN is not part of security, really. It's part of enterprise.
Okay, so that's not part of the syllabus, you're trying to say.
Right. No, it's not.
Arun, are
Won't
we
be a topic in
we are going to
exam.
see
Plus,
panorama
one more
also?
thing, just a second, I'll come back to you. Let me just answer
Okay.
answer the lady first. Yeah. So so one more thing about SD-WAN is the firewall based SD-WAN from Palo is not popular. Okay. And I mean, I would kind of say to this extent that it's not good as well. Okay.
Okay.
Palo also does another SD-WAN solution. Okay. So Palo acquired CloudGenix. which was an organization that does SD-WAN. Okay, so so this is something which is separate to the Palo Firewall based SD-WAN. So this is a much better solution and a much better product. Okay, so it has got their ION gateways, which act as edge devices. Okay, so this is a completely separate solution, a completely separate product. I'm not really sure if anyone outside of Palo does training for it because for the most part it is cloud based. Okay, so you don't have evaluation, etc. Possible for it. Okay.
Okay. Okay. But we are covering the entire syllabus of this next gen firewall, you're trying to say.
Correct. Whatever there is to it, I mean, whatever is possible to cover from a firewall perspective, yes, that's what we are going to cover from a next generation firewall perspective.
Including integration and automation as well, right? And API automate things, API things.
Yes, I'll discuss APIs.
Okay. Okay, sure. Thank you.
Sure. Yes. Someone else was asking something. Sorry to cut you off.
Panorama we are going to cover or not? We are going to testing or not?
I did mention this during the demo as well. Panorama, I can discuss, I can talk about, but you won't be able to do labs for Panorama. Okay, because it's a licensed product and it's not a cheap licensing as well. Okay, and without licensing, Panorama is basically of no use. So you cannot manage any firewall, you can't do anything.
URL filtering also require license. You are going to.
URL filtering does require licensing if you are trying to use the URL filtering database from Palo. Okay,
We are going to do the lab or not? URL filtering.
Yes. So okay. So a lot of the features that require licensing, okay, I will be showcasing to you because I have my own lab which has a licensed Palo firewall. Okay, so things like software updates, dynamic updates, content updates, some of the features which require licensing. I'll show them to you. I'll discuss them in detail. I'll show you how the configuration, everything happens, what it looks like and everything. Okay. You in your racks have access to evaluation firewalls, okay, which, like I mentioned in the demo as well, will help you to do 80 to 85% of everything. Okay, wherever there is a limitation from a licensing perspective, I'll call that out. Okay, but since I have a licensed firewall in my lab, I'll still be able to show you those things. So you can make notes, you can review the videos later on, okay, for reference perspective, you want to do something in production or whatever. Okay, so Panorama is one thing that is licensed. Okay, from a feature perspective, Global Protect is licensed. Okay, any software updates are licensed. Okay, content updates, or Palo calls them dynamic updates, they are licensed. Okay, and some other very small things, again, not too relevant. Okay, but again, you'll get to see those in action as well. Okay.
I'm
All right.
audible. I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
So, do we require any prior knowledge to understand these classes? Because I do not know anything on about firewalls.
That's fine. I'll give you enough information to, get you up and running. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
All right. But yes, I expect you to know at least, let's just say, at least a CCNA level knowledge.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm good
so
at CCNA.
yeah, so when I say DHCP, when I say ARP, right, when I say IP addressing, when I say routing, you should know what that is.
Yes, routing switching, I'm good at that.
Okay.
But at that topic,
That's all that's
about
needed. Yep, that's all that's required. Okay, and then yes, I mean, since you are kind of jumping in on the firewall side, coming from enterprise, then you need to do some homework as well. Okay, so whatever topics we cover, the labs we do, make sure you diligently go through those, come back, ask any questions. That's how you'll learn.
Yes, sir. And
All right.
what is the course code, sir? Like, for example, for CCNA, there is a 200-301. So, what is the code of this course main?
I mean, Palo doesn't do codes, for example, okay, because they don't have too many certifications like Cisco has. Okay, so this exam is basically called as a next generation firewall engineer certification. Okay, so
Okay.
there is technically no code. There might be a code here. I don't recall. Yeah, no. So Palo, like I said, Palo doesn't do any codes or anything. Okay, because there are very limited number of certifications that they do. Okay, so it's just the name that there is.
Okay.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Someone else has a question. When will
Sir, after
the lab?
the course, you will help for certification because some mock test conduction will be there or not.
I don't do mock tests, but what I do typically is when I do these Palo sessions is when we are done through it, I'll give you a capstone. Okay, so I'll give you some tasks, right, for you to go over yourself in the lab. Okay, so consider that to be kind of like a lab challenge. So whatever topics we have covered, whatever topics we have learned in the next 1.5 to 2 months, the capstone will basically be kind of like a lab exam, really. Okay, so you'll have to set up, and then that is kind of like a best way for you to review, see what you understood, see what you need to work on. Okay, so that's what I do typically after the classes. Okay, so I'll give this at the very end when we have our last session. Okay, and in the next class, I will also create a Discord group. Okay, again, I don't do WhatsApp. Okay, so please don't ask me for WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever. I do Discord. Okay, so I will create a group for all of us on Discord, and I'll share an invite for the Discord so everyone can join that. Okay, it's very similar to how Skype worked or Microsoft Teams works. Okay, so during the week, over the weekend, if you guys have any questions, issues, having some problems, something's not working, you can ask those questions in there. Okay, and then you guys are basically feel free to discuss things among yourselves as well. Be as interactive as possible. So this is something that we'll do next week. Oh, sorry, not next week, next class. Okay.
So these classes will be on daily basis, or like there are any specific days during the weekdays?
Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Okay, 3 days a week. And then if there are any changes to these days, maybe because we will have 2 days empty. Okay, so maybe sometimes I'm not available or there's some problem at my end, so I might adjust the days. I'll keep you guys informed in the Discord if that happens. Okay, if there's no update from my end or if there's no change, then these would be the days really.
So how can I get the meeting link every day? Because in ott.networking.com there is no links there. Every
There's
time I'm
no
calling that person on one of the networking person, he only sending the meeting link daily. So I'm depending on them.
Okay, I mean that is something that I'll let them know because that is something that I don't control. Okay, so everyone should have the link in the ODT itself. Okay, so if you don't have, then maybe reach out to Gaurav. Okay, or reach out to support team, ask them to connect you to Gaurav, and then he'll get you sorted out. If you don't have, or if you're having problems locating the link in the ODT.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir, how many days required to complete this course?
I mean, how many days are required? It really depends on how quick you are able to learn. The duration that I have, so it typically ranges from 35 to 40 hours. Okay. Typically, it runs more than 40 hours. Okay, but I'm just giving you a ballpark figure here for 35 to 40 hours. Okay. 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, so 6 to 8 weeks, 3 days a week, 2 hours sessions a day. So that kind of brings out to 6 hours a week. Okay, more or less. So that's the time that will take me to complete the content. Okay, and then from your perspective, how soon you would be able to learn or how much time it will take, it really depends on where you're coming from. So for example, the other gentleman, he is coming from an enterprise background, knows the firewall or doesn't know the firewall. So it might take him maybe 2 months, okay, to understand things, and maybe another month or so to really get things behind him, be able to, talk confidently, maybe on the exam and interviews, any discussions, etc. Someone who might already have experience with firewalls, 1 month would be or should be more than enough for them. Okay, so it really depends upon individual to individual. Okay, one solution doesn't fit all, kind of a thing. Okay. Someone had a question, when will the lab access be available for practice? I mean, ask the support team. Everyone should have access to the lab at this point. Okay. So if you don't have any information around that, please reach out to the support team. They'll be able to sort you out. Okay. All right. That was some good discussions. Great. Any other questions, anyone? Okay. So let's start with discussing some of the, I typically call these some of the common network security terms that everyone should be aware about. Okay, and I'm pretty sure everyone must have heard about a lot of these terms in production when studying, going through documentations, or maybe reading through, blogs or posts, maybe on LinkedIn, etc., whatever, right? So the first one is what we call as assets. Okay, now asset is anything which the organization, which you as an individual has invested in, which has some sort of a value to it. Okay, which is valuable to the organization or it's valuable to you as an individual. Things like vehicles, building, employees, computers. From an organization perspective, from you as an individual perspective, your data, intellectual property, all of these classify as assets. When we talk about cybersecurity, when we talk about information security, when we talk about network security, the goal is to protect the assets. Okay, that's the primary function behind being security, or being a security engineer, being a security analyst, being a security consultant, an architect, whatever. Protecting the organization's assets. You as an individual, protecting your individual assets is the primary function of security. Okay, it could be physical security, it could be network security, but when we talk about security, that's what we're trying to protect. Okay, from network security perspective, obviously the assets will be things like servers, right? Disks, data. Okay, and data could be anything, really. Okay, data could be something as simple as your name, your date of birth, your email address, your telephone number, your home address. All of that is data. It's called as PII. Okay, how many of you heard about PII? Has anyone heard about PII? Or has anyone heard about PHI? Personally identifiable information.
Yep.
Okay, which is any sort of data which you can directly or indirectly use to identify an individual. Like I said, names, addresses, right? In India, we have PAN cards, Aadhaar numbers, passport numbers, email addresses. They all classify as PII. Okay, that is valuable. That is valuable to you as an individual. I would not want unauthorized people to have access to any of that data. Okay. In contrast, we have PHI. Anyone heard about PHI?
Health information, right?
Correct. PHI stands for Protected Health Information. It is sensitive data for who? Patients, doctors, clinics, hospitals, medical records. Okay, so a better term, any sort of medical records. This is any sort of personal records. Okay, so so all of these, they require strict privacy. They need to be secure. Okay, so all of this, it basically comes down to being called as assets. Okay. Now, how can someone steal your assets, steal your data? Because of a weakness. Okay, so again, we are using mobile devices. We are using a lot of different softwares, applications. We have got smart TVs, smart bulbs, right? Cameras, IP cameras, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of you might be using something like a Google Nest or Amazon Echo, Amazon Alexa. Okay, so everything is connected to the internet, right? Everything has some sort of an IP reachability. Okay, for example, I'm using a Mac device. Some of you might be using Windows 10, Windows 11. Someone you might be using Linux. Every system, every design has its weaknesses or has some sort of a weakness because every system is human created. Okay, it's created by us. Okay, it's people like us who are writing or creating codes or softwares, right? So chances for errors and mistakes are always there in anything that is humanly created. Okay, so any sort of weakness is what we call as a vulnerability. Okay. Now, an attacker or a hacker can damage, can steal assets if he finds a vulnerability, if he finds a weakness. Now, vulnerability or weakness could be as simple as using default username and password, reusing passwords, not using complex and secure passwords, right? This is a very basic thing, okay? But it also introduces weakness, okay? So anytime there's a weakness, it's basically called as a vulnerability, okay? And that's what attackers try to figure out, try to find. And if they are able to find a vulnerability, find a weakness in your application, in your system, in your device, in your organization, they might be able to steal the assets. They might be able to damage the assets, okay? Corrupt the assets, for example. Okay. Now, obviously, the attackers or the hackers, they're very knowledgeable, okay? They need some sort of a method. They need some sort of a tool to cause the damage, right? To make use of the weakness or the vulnerability. That tool is called as an exploit. Okay, again, an exploit could be a software, it could be a hardware. Okay, it could be some sort of a WhatsApp-based scam. It could be a spam email. Okay, I'm pretty sure everyone would have, at some point in time in their life, would have received an email where you might have won an iPhone. Okay, and the email asks you to click on a link to get your reward or get your prize. What are those? They are basically spam. Okay, it's a way to get you or get the end user to click on a link. Okay, maybe redirect them to some sort of a shady website where they might ask you to enter your PII information, your credit card information, your banking information. Okay, so any way, any method in which an attacker might try to find a weakness or affect the system, basically called as an exploit. Okay, so these three terms are very crucial. You're gonna see them, you're gonna hear them a lot throughout your security journey and also throughout our sessions as well. Okay, so it's very important for you to understand all three of these. Not too complex. They're very simple. Just correlate them to anything real world that you might have. Okay, just like I explained through some of these examples. Okay. Now, technically, it's impossible to have zero weakness. Okay, like I said, everything is human created, and no matter how smart we are, we will always make mistakes, a lot of times unintentionally. And those introduces weaknesses. They introduce vulnerabilities. Okay, so it's not possible to have 100% secure environment. Okay, there will always be a chance that some sort of a weakness or some sort of a vulnerability will always be there. Okay, now your job as a security engineer as a security consultant or whatever the designation might be, is to make sure that that number is as close to zero as possible. Okay, it cannot be zero. Okay, you cannot have zero vulnerabilities or zero weaknesses. Okay, but your goal is to have that number as close to zero as possible. Okay. Now, another key term is threat. Threat is any danger to an asset. Okay, threat is basically danger to an asset, right? So think of this, right? You may be taking a walk, okay, outside, right? It's 2 a.m. in the morning, right? No lights, no nothing, no one on the road. Okay, there is a threat, right? You might be in danger, right? Someone might be able to exploit you. Okay, the weakness is, or the vulnerability here is you are alone at an unwanted time, right? There is no one else there with you to help you out. Okay, so you yourself have introduced a weakness, a vulnerability, and someone might be able to exploit that. Okay, and the danger that we are talking about to you, because you are an asset as well, is what we call as a threat. From networking perspective, from an internet perspective, from an enterprise perspective, a lot of time threats are, and this is a very commonly heard thing that you might have, is a virus. Okay, viruses are created to affect the assets, right? They are created to make use of vulnerabilities or weaknesses, to steal the data, to corrupt the data, to cause all sorts of problems. Okay? So a viruses or a virus at a very high level, this can be put into the category of malware. Okay, now malware has, or I'm pretty sure everyone would have heard about the term malware. It's made up of two words. Mal, which stands for malicious, and ware, which stands for software. Okay, so malware is nothing but it's malicious software or bad code. That's not a bad spelling. Okay, so they're good codes, they're bad codes, right? So you're using Windows 10, Windows 11, Mac. They're all good softwares, they're good codes, right? They have been written to ease your work. Then there are bad pieces of code, bad softwares, bad applications that have been written by people just like us, but with the intention of doing damage to your assets. Okay, so viruses are a category of malware. Okay, so malware is an umbrella term. Okay, so malware has lots of different categories. One of them is virus. Another is worm or worms. We have something that we call as Trojans. I'm pretty sure everyone has heard about ransomwares. There are spywares, adwares, keyloggers. Right? How many of you know all of these? I'll be surprised if everyone knows all of these. Okay. How many of you know what these two are? Or can anyone tell me the difference between a virus and a worm? Okay, so a virus is, again, all of these are bad pieces of software, bad pieces of code written specifically to do some sort of a damage to an asset. Okay. A virus is something that requires human or user interaction to spread. Okay, so it might be some sort of an application. It might be an exe file. It might be a link, or it might be an attachment in an email, and the user will have to either download it, double click it, do some sort of an interaction with it. Without interaction, viruses cannot spread. Okay, that's why it's easier to manage and contain viruses. On the other hand, we have worm or worms. Worms spread without any human interaction. Okay, so they themselves, they keep spreading, they keep replicating. You should read about, and this is a very interesting worm. I love you worm. Okay, so it was a very interesting one. It's not recent, but it's a fairly old one. And wherever possible, I'll give you names of some of these very interesting malwares that you can read about. Okay, and you can think of the fact that how do attackers came to create these softwares which could do some of these things. Okay, so why it's called I love you worm is, so what this worm used to do is, if it infected your PC, for example, it is going to look through your address book, okay, your email contacts. It is going to then automatically attach itself to emails, and then it would send those emails to all of your contacts or email addresses. And then it will add the subject line as I love you. Okay, so that's why it came to known as the I love you worm. So it did not need any interaction. That's how it spread across the world very quickly. Okay, it infected a PC, it looked through the contacts, email addresses, created the email itself, attached it, sent it to everyone. And then it kept doing that again and again and again. Okay. Another category is Trojans. How many of you have seen the movie Troy and know about that wooden horse or seen that wooden horse scene that was used by the Greeks? No one has seen the movie Troy?
Yeah, I've seen it.
You've seen it. Okay. So if you recall that, so a Trojan is something that appears to be good. Okay, appears to be good, but in reality, it is something else. Okay, so for example, you might see, or an attacker might create a software, but have it look like a PDF file, or maybe an exe file, right? Now, when you run that file, or when the user runs that file, in the background, you actually are executing or running that bad code or that bad piece of software. Okay, so that's what that's where the reference that I typically, or that's where this gets the name, the Trojan horse. Okay, it's from that movie. Right. So I mean, it's not really from the movie, but it's from the Trojan War that happened. But obviously, not everyone knows about or would learn the Greek history. But Troy, a lot of people have seen that movie. So what really happened was, so the Greeks they created this giant wooden hollow horse. Okay, and they presented that as a gift. Okay, when they were actually having the fight and everything. Okay, so it was used to hide the soldiers inside. And they presented that as a gift to the city of Troy. Okay, now they opened their gates, the wooden horse entered the city. During the night, the soldiers came out, they opened the doors, allowed the Greeks to enter the city and basically kill everyone, kind of. Okay, so that horse, it kind of looked to be, or from Troy's perspective, or from the city of Troy's perspective, it looked to be harmless. But in actuality, it actually had soldiers hidden in it. Okay, that's what the Trojans are. They appear to be harmless, but then in reality, they have been created to do some harm, basically. Okay, pretty sure everyone knows about ransomwares. Okay, very famous one was WannaCrypt. Okay, and ransomwares do act a lot of times like worms as well. Okay, but then they kind of keep replicating and keep spreading in the organization themselves, and whichever device they hit, they encrypt the files on that device with very strong encryption that you cannot decrypt without having some sort of a password, some sort of a key, which obviously you cannot figure out yourself. Okay, and then the attackers ask you for some sort of a money to give you that password to unlock those files, right? So basically they demand ransom. That's why it's called a ransomware. Okay, because it's used to gain money or ransom. Okay, some other categories of these malwares that we have is these spywares and these adwares, right? So back in the day, I'm pretty sure everyone would have used those Pentium 3, Pentium 4 PCs, right? Running Windows XP. And a lot of times you used to get those pop-up ads. Okay, and during that period, we used to basically say, hey, your PC is affected with virus, it's very slow, etc., etc. Your PC is used to be affected with adwares. Okay, so these are the least harmful of all the categories of malware, because they are typically created to analyze your behavior, your patterns, what you are trying to access on the internet, and then present you ads for them. Okay. The only downside to adsware is they kind of reuse the resources for your device, so you might experience slowness. But apart from that, they don't really do anything else. Okay. They just analyze your patterns, your buying patterns, what sort of websites you access, are you trying to look for something, etc., etc., and then they present you with ads. Okay. So they're typically used by marketing organizations, etc., etc. Okay. Though it's, I mean, obviously it's not legal, but then that's the way it is. Okay. On the other hand, when you have spywares, okay, so name, always look at the name, right? So adwares is giving you ads. Spywares, again, they also don't harm, but then they are spying on you. Okay, they might take screenshots of your screen while you're trying to work. Okay, they also might look at or monitor your activity on the net, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to access, and then send that information to some attacker, some hacker somewhere on the internet without you knowing about it. Okay, and this category here, keyloggers. These could be softwares or they could be hardware. And when I say hardware, they could be as small as, I'm not sure if you guys use mouse with those USB adapters, right? Wireless mouse with those USB adapters, they're very small adapters, right? So when you plug it into the USB-A ports on your laptops or devices or computers, it's hardly noticeable, okay? Keyloggers are that small, but their job is very dangerous. They record your keystrokes on the keyboard. Okay, so for example, if you access your banking website, you enter username and password, it could record your keystrokes. So in actuality, they would be recording your username and password and send that information to the attacker. Okay, that's why it's always advised not to use public computers, public devices, public systems to access things like your internet banking, for example, or for doing any financial transactions. Another thing, which I'm not really sure if a lot of you would have noticed, ever wondered why your banking websites give you an option to use virtual keyboard? Okay, so if you don't recall, try to access your banking website, whichever you might be using, HDFC, ICICI, whatever, right? When you try to log into your internet banking, you will always have an option to use a virtual keyboard. That is there to protect you from keyloggers. Okay, because when you're trying to use the virtual keyboard, you would be using the mouse, not the actual keyboard. Okay, so the keylogger effectively will not be able to figure out your username and password. Okay, so next time if you have to be in a place where you might be, or you might have to use your friend's laptop, your friend's device, maybe some unknown person's device, or maybe you might have to use a PC or a system somewhere which is obviously unsecure, in not your control, try to use the virtual keyboard as much as possible. Okay, because the keyloggers are very easy to install. They kind of plug and play. Okay, and they will give out a lot of information. All right, cool. So some of the things that, or some of the threats, some of the possible threats that are out there. Okay, and this is very, very real. Okay. Another threat, which is very recent, I mentioned the Cloudflare thing in the very beginning, and I mean, I have been controlling myself from talking about it because I kind of like to discuss things which are happening out there. So I'm pretty sure everyone knows what Cloudflare is or who Cloudflare is, right? Now, Cloudflare also went through an outage some weeks ago, maybe about a month ago. Cloudflare underwent, or Cloudflare had gone through an attack recently. And I think it was in the first week of December this year itself. It was a distributed denial of service attack. Okay. Now, when I say distributed denial of service attack, it basically means that Cloudflare received large amounts of packets, large amounts of data from more than one location, from more than one source IP address. Okay, that's what we call as distributed. Okay, because the attack or the packets are coming from lots of different places. Okay, that's why it's distributed. So these packets, these distributed denial of service attack that happened, it broke all records this time. Cloudflare received 29.7 terabits per second of data. Okay, so that's TBPS, which is around 14.1 billion packets per second. Okay, that's per second. Okay, and this denial of service, it happened by malicious routers, IoT devices, unsecure endpoints on the internet, which are being controlled by attackers. So this is said to be affected by Isuru botnet. Okay, now this is another threat, botnets. Okay, and I'll quickly explain what botnet is. This is a very real world problem nowadays. Botnets, okay? We all know IoT devices are very common nowadays. Like I said, things like your wearables, smart watches, right? I kind of like to call them IoT as well. Okay, so smart watches, smart bulbs, right? A lot of people use cameras, IP cameras, right? Internet connected door cameras, doorbells, those sort of things, right? Which are, or these IoT devices which are connected to the internet, but they do not run the latest and the greatest softwares. So they run some sort of a fork or some sort of a ripoff of Linux. They don't run things like Windows. They don't run the common Linux system. They might be running some modified, some custom software, which technically never receives any sort of software updates or any sort of vulnerability fixes. Okay, and they're connected to the internet. So anyone can access and try to exploit these IoT devices. Okay, so if an attacker kind of figures out that, hey, okay, these devices are connected to the internet and they are this model, whatever, they have this vulnerability, it has not been fixed, they could install some malware on these devices and make them act as a bot, right? And a bot is someone which does not have its own intelligence, right? So this device will now act under the influence of the attacker, or whatever the attacker basically tells him to. Now, what if I infect millions of such devices on the internet? Millions of such IoT devices on the internet. So combining them, they form their own network. Okay, that's what we call as botnet. Okay, so this botnet, this ISRU botnet, this is estimated to have around 4 million devices globally, infected devices globally. Internet connected routers, IoT gadgets, and other unsecured endpoints. Okay, so read about this. Also, read about Mirai botnet, another famous botnet. Cloudflare also went through an attack through the Mirai botnet some years ago. Okay, so not really sure what Cloudflare does to pisses off attackers and everything, but Cloudflare has been under attack for or quite a number of times. Okay, now the extent for this attack is, so you can clearly understand the seriousness of this. Okay, and surprisingly, Cloudflare was able to mitigate this attack without any problems. Okay, so this was a record-breaking attack that happened this time. So this was kind of like a new world record with the amount of data that was being sent per second. Okay, so nowadays we are dealing with a lot of sophisticated threats, lots of sophisticated attacks out there. Okay, so that's why you see a lot of emphasis, a lot of money being poured in by organizations into the security aspect as well. Okay, because you literally don't know, or literally never know, who is going to hit the organization and at what or with what intensity. Okay, so lots of different talking terms for you to read more about. All right, again, do yourself a favor and do myself a favor as well. Read through a lot of these, right? Go through Google. Don't need to do any additional books or anything. Just make a note of these. Okay, so again, as I'm going through, like I said, I don't have any slides or anything, but as I'm going through and doing these whiteboarding, just make a note of the keywords that you see. Okay, and then while you're sitting on bed trying to doze off, doing some work, spend 10-15 minutes here and there and read some of those things. Okay, a lot of these topics that I've mentioned, they're very interesting if you read a little bit about them as well. Okay, now one more term that you would see being utilized a lot in organization is the aspect of risk. Okay, and risk is basically a probability. Okay, a probability of damage or loss of your asset. Okay, so if I'm running an organization, if I have an organization, let's say I'm Amazon, right? I have my own data centers, right? I host web servers, which internet-based users are accessing. Okay, now obviously Amazon cannot distinguish between me as a legitimate user and an attacker. So Amazon is at risk as well. there is a probability, there's a possibility that someone might try to affect assets, similar to how Cloudflare here is. Okay, so risk is typically comprised of asset plus threat plus vulnerability. Okay, so if you have assets, if there are weaknesses, obviously there will be threat and there will be risk. You cannot have zero risk environments. That is technically impossible. Okay, there will always be some sort of a risk. The only time you won't have any risk is you buy a new laptop or a device, you never connect it to the internet, keep it locked somewhere in a locker. Okay, so no weakness, no threat, no risk. Okay, but if you are connected to the internet, if you're trying to access the internet, if you are in kind of like the hybrid world that we are in, interconnected, we are everywhere, there's always going to be risk. The goal is to be as close to zero as possible, as close to zero risk as possible. Okay, try to do whatever you need to protect the assets, protect it against threats or vulnerabilities, weaknesses, etc. That's how you will be able to minimize the risk. Okay, and how do you minimize the risk is by something that we call as a countermeasure. For example, we'll be discussing firewall in these sessions. Firewall is a countermeasure. Okay, it is something that your organization is going to use to try and mitigate threats, right? To try to make sure no one is able to do any of these or do any of these. Okay, that's what a countermeasure really is. And risk is not just digital. Risk could be physical as well. Okay, so when you are kind of designing an organization, when you're trying to look at from a let's say security architecture perspective, an environment architecture perspective, you also look at physical risks. And a very common example is maybe you're trying to host your data or your applications in a data center, but the location in which the data center is more prone to earthquakes, or maybe hurricanes, or maybe it's more prone to floods. That is a risk as well. Okay, now what can you do to mitigate that risk? Don't have a data center in that location. That's one, right? So the possibility of an earthquake, flood, hurricane, whatever, tsunami, anything, any natural disaster, right? That is a threat that you have. It's a natural threat. Okay, now if I remove that threat, I move my data center to a completely safe location which does not have any of these. I have mitigated the threat and I have reduced the risk. Or if I can't do that, I could have high availability, right? I could store copies of data backup into my DR location, into a disaster recovery location, into another location which is very far away from this geographical location, and it's in a much safer place. So I have here tried to reduce the risk as well. If this data center gets damaged, I have my data, I have my assets in another safe location as well. Okay, so kind of understand why high availability is used, right? It is a way to mitigate risk, reduce the risk, not have a single point of failure. All right. Questions? I've been speaking for the past 1.5 hours. So any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll probably take that no for everyone as well. All right. Now, in addition to this, 3 other key components that you should have like at the back of your hand when you're dealing with anything cybersecurity or information security. CIA, not the US Central Intelligence Agency, not that. But this is called as a CIA triad. Now, this typically is the goal behind information security or cybersecurity. These 3 letters. First is confidentiality. This is the first goal of enterprise security. Confidentiality. Data should be protected, or that's not the correct term. Privacy. Data information should only be made available to authorized individuals. People who do not have the right, who do not have proper permissions, should not be able to access data. Okay, so you accessing your banking information, your internet banking account, only you should be authorized to view that information. No one else without your permission. That's confidentiality. Okay, keeping the data secure and private, protecting the data no matter if the data is at rest or data is in transit. Okay, 2 very common examples. At rest, a lot of organizations, they give out devices, right? Corporate managed laptops. A lot of organizations, InfoSec policy wants the hard drives to be encrypted through something like very commonly used Windows BitLocker. That is to protect the data at rest. Okay, if, for example, the asset gets stolen, no one will be able to do anything with that laptop or with that hard drive because it's encrypted. In transit, think of VPNs. When we create a VPN tunnel, we do encryption. When you access your internet banking website, you're making use of HTTPS, which is HTTP traffic over TLS. TLS is doing the encryption, the confidentiality. Okay, so that's why you are accessing over internet, but your traffic is protected, it's encrypted, it's confidential. So how is confidentiality achieved? Through encryption. Okay. Second component, again, another important one, another goal behind doing anything enterprise security or network security or information security or cybersecurity. Integrity. The data should be maintained and it should be consistent. There should be no alterations to the data. If I send the data from A to B, the way the data was at source, it should be the same way at B when it's received. In the path, there should be no change that would have happened or that should have happened to the data. That's integrity. Data is accurate and unchanged. It's not changed by unauthorized people. Okay, I'm pretty sure everyone, I expect everyone here to have CCNA level knowledge, right? At the within OSI, at the Ethernet layer, right? We do CRC checks, right? Cyclic redundancy check or checksums, right? They were done for this very purpose, that there were no changes that would have happened to the Ethernet header, no corruption or anything that would have happened. Okay, so integrity is taken care of by doing hashing. Okay, so a couple of these things, encryption, hashing, I'll discuss them in more detail when we'll talk about certificates, when we'll do the certificates on the firewall. Okay, so for now, I'm just trying to give you some talking tips, some talking points, some talking topics to build that foundation for you. Okay, so don't worry if you don't know what hashing is. We'll talk about that. All right, that's what the hashing is. Data received by the recipient must be exactly the same as the data sent from the sender or sent by the sender. Okay. And the last goal that we have, and which I already discussed, is availability. Okay, all three are important. Okay, applications, datas, systems, devices, they must be available to authorized users on demand or whenever needed or whenever requested. Okay, that's what the goal behind availability is, to make sure the data, network resources are available to legitimate users. The denial of service attack that I discussed, the denial of service or distributed denial of service, that's the most common attack to affect the availability of resources or services. Okay, that's why we do high availability. Okay, and another common thing which can affect the availability is the natural disaster piece. Okay, so you should have, or the environment or the organization should have safeguards to address availability concerns. Okay, have things like high availability, do clustering, have environmental controls, do virtualization, right? Maybe make use of cloud resources as well, do hybrid environments, have resilient systems, etc., etc. Whatever it takes to make sure that the data and the traffic remains. Data and the resources basically remain available to users. Okay, so the CIA triad, that is the goal behind anything that you do with respect to security, literally. Okay. Do we have questions from anyone? Okay. So, like I said, I'll keep it short today as the first class, first day. Okay. So I don't want to discuss and talk about everything that I have to today. Okay. So we'll stop here. We'll end here today. We'll meet on Thursday now. And there'll be a couple of things that we will obviously be doing on Thursday. Before Thursday, which I have to do, obviously, is to get the topology ready, because most probably by Friday, we will start doing the labs. Okay, at least start setting up the lab environment. Okay, the lab environment that we have or that I have built, you will be setting up from scratch. Okay, so things like setting up the router, getting the internet access in the lab, setting up the switches, doing the VLANs and everything. Okay, that is all that you would be setting up yourself to. So I would be walking over all aspects of setting the infra, setting up the lab Windows server, where would be setting it up for DNS, for Active Directory, for things like certificates, because these are some of the topics that we will be going through and labbing these up in the lab. Okay. Then, obviously, I'll be walking you through setting up the Palo Firewall from the scratch. Okay. Doing the updates and everything, show you how the updates happen, talk about those. Again, some of the topics, and I'll keep going through those and calling them out, whichever rely on a license, which you won't be able to do here in the lab yourself, but I'll be able to demonstrate it to you and talk about those. Okay, so that's what the goal would typically be. Okay, so Thursday we'll start our discussion of firewalls. Okay, talk about different generations of firewalls, and I might be able to start talking about the Palo environment on Thursday itself. And then from Friday, most probably we should be able to start with the labs. Okay, and then I should also have the Discord server available by Thursday as well. Okay. Anything from anyone before I let you guys go for the day? All right. Okay, then. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. Okay. Hope
Thank you.
it was interesting. Hope you learned a couple of things. Make sure to do your homework, like I always say. Okay. Make sure to note down the key points. Make sure to read through those. Ask questions in the next class. Okay. Okay. If you want to keep things as interactive as possible. All right. And then I'll see you guys on Thursday then. Take care. Have a good week.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night. Bye bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you for
Bye bye.
good night.